Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Dexia Insights. I'm Dr. Aditi Joshi, and this is where we cut through the hype to explore healthcare innovation that actually works. Each episode, I talk with leaders and practitioners who are navigating digital transformation, whether telemedicine, AI, pharmaceuticals, and systems changes, sharing real stories from the trenches and practical strategies for creating healthcare change that people can trust. This week, I have the pleasure of having Stéphane Tholander, who is from France and Paris, where I live. He is a serial entrepreneur and digital health pioneer based in Paris. He co-founded Sybil Tech, which became the first French company to receive CE marking in Class 2A under the new medical device regulation. He then founded Agora Health to reduce time to market for digital medical devices and launched AppThera, a platform for prescribing digital therapies. He's currently vice president of France Biotech, overseeing digital health. He is a chemist by training, so he has a medical and scientist background and a graduate of ESCP Business School. Thanks, Stéphane, for being here with me. You have about 15 years of experience in the field of innovation, and you founded several companies. A lot of them are in software, marketing, consulting, biotech, and now you're in these digital health ventures. I'm curious, when you are thinking about how medical devices or the way that scientific services work in the marketplace, while you have that experience, I am curious, how is healthcare different, and in what way did it surprise you when you went into making and building Agora Health and AppThera?
I would say that coming from another field outside of the medical field, what really surprised me as a company builder is that in healthcare, your payer is not your user. And it's easy to say when you know the field that when you are used to have clients, customers who are the one pay for your services or your products, it's quite surprising when you say, okay, now I will put something on the market. I will try to drive usage, but then I would have to have another path for my business model, and it's sometimes completely unrelated.
Yeah, that's true. And that's also one of the other differences in my experience. You have clinicians who are required to prescribe, to also be the translator, interpreter for between patients and whatever they require in the healthcare system. When you're talking about that aspect, when I think about within France, you have an entire system of figuring out how to actually prescribe digital devices. We've talked about this a lot about the Pécan system. I would be curious if you could give some background on why that was built and why that exists in the digital health space in France, and what are the benefits of it?
Say that having systems like our European systems where lots of health expenditures are just reimbursed at national level by one or two players, especially in France, we have one main health insurance, public health insurance. If you want to provide access to most of citizens to technologies, then you need to have a path for reimbursement. It's very hard to deploy a technology directed to patients or involving patients where you will ask either patients to pay, out of pocket will be very hard to reach, and at least it will be hard to make more than maybe 5% of people pay for technology and new technology in healthcare. And having hospitals or clinics to pay also will be quite hard for a certain number of technologies, especially the digital medical devices in remote monitoring and digital therapeutics. So this is why for a certain number of pathologies, French state decided back in 2018 to have an experimental pathway for reimbursement in diabetes, chronic diseases like heart failure, kidney failure, and lung diseases, to test how we could reimburse and deploy remote monitoring solutions in these fields. And now 2 years ago, the state decided to open this experimental framework to what we call PCAN. That is a way to reimburse remote monitoring solutions in all indications and digital therapeutics in all indications. So to get to a reimbursement in France, you will need to have, of course, a CE marking certificate. You are under the EU regulation framework. You will need to comply to other requirements from the French national IT healthcare system, and also to have an ongoing clinical study, hopefully a randomized clinical trial that shows your impact, whether on the organizational aspects of the care pathway or having a clinical impact on quality of life or even better on morbidity or mortality.
Great. And so for the audience, I also just want to highlight something that Stéphane said was that in general, in France, unlike the US, people are less likely to want to pay out of pocket because almost all of their services are covered by the governmental insurance. People seem to like that, obviously, but it's a very different market to what exists in the US, where people are used to paying out of pocket, sometimes for very expensive type of digital solutions. And so it ends up that we have an entire market that's direct to consumer without some of these regulations. Back to this question about regulations, we talked about how you're part of the first French company to receive a CE marking in class 2A under medical device regulation in 2021. I'm just curious, what do you see, or what do you think that most entrepreneurs don't understand about navigating the European medical device regulations?
I think there are two aspects. The regulation part, and I think it's a good thing now in Europe. It's homogenized, and once you get it in one country, then it's easy to make it work in other countries. That's a very good thing that we have this EU regulation. It's not the case for other topics regarding healthcare systems, but this EU regulation makes it easy to have at least a European access for digital medical devices. The hard thing is that applying some classic physical medical device considerations to software was not as easy as expected. And what we have seen now is that even the European Commission is willing to simplify this regulation and make it easier for digital medical devices to access CE marking. And so at France Biotech, we pushed a lot with our members to point out the insufficiencies and complexities of the current system. But still, it is feasible. It's a lot of work because you need to have a quality system in place. And again, entrepreneurs coming from the medical field, they know this. Entrepreneurs willing to make an impact in healthcare and coming from, let's say, other technologies or the digital field, they have to learn that there are some constraints and you have to apply processes in the context of your quality management system. And then some technologies didn't fit quite easily into the regulation. For instance, having an API, an autonomous system, being embedded software, all these cases that we know in the digital field were not 100% covered. And notified bodies, meaning the legal entities that are responsible for the audits and certification, because in Europe, you have in each country companies, independent companies who are in charge of audits and certification, where in the US, everything is done by the FDA. So in Europe, these notified bodies, it took them some time to understand how they will apply a regulation made for medical devices also to software. And so we were learning all together for software and medical devices. And what we see now is that these same notified bodies have to be up to date on the AI Act and generative AI and how you should certify LLMs and so on. And it's the same thing we are seeing now in 2025, 26 as the thing we saw back in 2021 for medical devices.
Okay, so this AI Act. So for the audience, it's actually Europe's AI Act is a regulatory and governance, basically regulate how AI is delivered and to look at the LLMs to make sure that they're done and adhere to certain laws of privacy and security that are part of the EU. When we're thinking about that, because how do we actually implement and create adherence to these digital tools? And so part of AppThera, right, to facilitate these prescription delivery and adherence to digital therapies. How do you make sure that when these digital therapeutics work, but physicians aren't prescribing them, how do you actually get over that bottleneck? And what have you learned about getting physicians to adopt the tools and prescribe them?
Actually, it was our starting point at AppThera. We really wanted to create a company in the digital therapeutics field because we believe they have a huge potential also in terms of prevention of other diseases. Because when you eat better, when you sleep better, when you have a clearer mind, when you're not depressed, it's all these ways to avoid having maybe more severe diseases. So really, we wanted to have these apps used as treatments as broadly as possible. When we look at this field, we understood that one of the bottlenecks was exactly what you are mentioning, meaning, okay, we have digital therapeutics available on the market, maybe reimbursed, or what? Or will we talk to physicians, make them first discover what a DTX is, because most of them haven't heard of it. And then after you pitch your startup, you pitch your app, the question is, okay, how do I make sure that my patients will get access to it? How do I prescribe it? And how to ensure that the patient will indeed download the app? And these are simple questions, but if you do not answer them, you have exactly what you described, meaning you have great technology, a great way to have new lines of treatment, but no prescriptions. So we really focused on first having a catalog of apps available, targeting GPs especially, because when you are a GP, you have patients with obesity, you have patients with insomnia, you have patients with depression and other mental health issues. So it's this primary care setting is the best way to have most of the patients and having a catalog of apps for one physician to prescribe. So meaning that by presenting AppThera as a catalog, as a marketplace to physicians, it avoids or at least helps them. It saves some time in medical visits. They do not have to talk to all apps and having dozens of medical visitors to make their pitch and so on. So it's really one gateway. So that's lowering the cost of acquisition for the apps and lowering the time involvement needed for the physician to get onboarded on these concepts. And then we made a very simple marketplace where information were structured always the same way. Again, especially GPs in France, they don't have time. They have like 10 to 15 minutes per patient. They do not have time to dig into each apps or each platforms and understand where they should click and why and log into all these systems. So we made a very simple logging system, a very simple App Store-like platform, and then very easy way to prescribe in 1 or 2 clicks by being really integrated into national healthcare IT systems with patients, social security card, physicians, professional card, and so on. So it's quite easy to prescribe. And then, and that's a very important part, we make sure that patients download the app. And then once it's done, we inform the physician that the patient downloaded the app. It's key because what we understood from the US market and from the German market is that once a patient received a prescription for a DTX, for digital therapeutics, just half of them went on the stores and downloaded the app. With our system, we have more than 80% of patients going to the App Store and downloading the app. So it's simple. We remove friction for the physicians and for the patients so that these adoptions could be a reality.
So I talk a lot about this tech adoption, and 60% is incredibly high. One key thing that is important to mention is that you're talking that all of these tools have been vetted. They are accepted. And so then the physicians do not have to look at it and determine, does this work or does this not? And in the US, as you know, and for those listening, we don't really have those regulations in a way that's very clear all the time. The FDA doesn't necessarily regulate every single type of digital tool depending on the classification and what it's saying it's doing. And so we end up flooded in the market without any of this ability to really decipher between all of the things. So I really want to highlight that and you're talking, just about when reimbursement happens, because when, in France, I know that you've had a lot of experience getting this working. When you find that you're working to try to get a new digital solution reimbursed, what is the general process of doing it? Is there a lot of opportunity, and is it fairly easy to do within the system and how it works?
The bar is very high for reimbursement in France. We have some dozens of remote monitoring solutions already reimbursed, like something like 40 solutions are available on the market, and they are striving actually. Most of them now are widely deployed in France. Some DTX struggle to access reimbursement for now. In 2026, if some of them access actual reimbursement, but so far the bar was so high that none of them already succeeded to get reimbursement. You have other projects through the Article 51 where apps and digital medical devices can receive funding, or the Forfait Innovation. So we have a handset of ways to get public funding or pre-reimbursement before having the full clinical package then to provide to authorities to be fully listed This beacon phase is a 1-year reimbursement, and then you get fully listed as a remote monitoring solution or as a DTA. So you will need, again, CE marking, compliance to French IT regulations in healthcare, and clinical evidence through observational studies, but mainly through randomized clinical trials with the highest bar and even expectations. And the cultural acceptance of digital technologies in France is still mild, I would say. We are not the most innovative country when it comes to accept digital technologies. So still, there is a strong political willingness to make it happen and to deploy these solutions, but the expectations are very high. So you need to be conscious that you will have to invest a lot in clinical trials and clinical evidence if you want to get reimbursed in France.
Yeah, so the bar is high in all ways, whether from the government, the regulations, the reimbursement, but also from the population itself. And I know you said that they're not necessarily willing to do it. One story I always tell, do a lot of telemedicine and telehealth. But when I speak to my friends or people I know in France, they call it teleconsultation, teleconsultations, because the definition is a little bit more narrow than the way that we use it in the US. And I think for me, personally, that has been a reminder of how that changes. But also, as an outsider, I don't always think it's a bad thing, because when you say that the bar is high, that when you do have something that gets implemented, an innovative thing gets adopted, it actually works, because a lot of the barriers had to go through a lot of different hoops to get successful. And so I do see that. All right, I know we're running out of time, and I wanted to ask one last thing, because you are the vice president in France Biotech, and just you do a lot of work within Europe. And so I'm just curious, what do you find most exciting about your digital health in Europe or in France?
About Europe, because Europe needs more harmonization. We have strong healthcare systems where most of people have health insurance and strong coverage. So if you take the European market as a whole, it's a huge market. It's a huge market. But if you have to go through each country to get regulatory approval in some way, so it's not the case for CE marking, but some kind of IT system specificities, national specificities. And if you need to run a study in each country, it will be a very long way. So what we are pushing for, and European Commission knows this, most of European leaders are pushing for this, is more harmonization in the assessment frameworks for digital health technologies. So that my hope is that in a few years, we'll be able to develop a new technology, maybe in the US, maybe in France, maybe in Germany, maybe in Italy, and access European market at once. That will be my hope. And this is why also we are fighting for at France Biotech.
No, that's really exciting. And I think that in general, too, that when I think about Europe, we talked about how the barrier is high, but it's complicated because technically you still have different countries. There's different languages and different cultures, but still there has been this commitment to have a digital health. So it's really exciting and very interesting. And so I want to thank you for joining me, Stéphane. And if this conversation resonated with you or you're interested, follow along. We'll be talking to more people around the world who are building healthcare innovations that stabilizes societies and improves patient care. So merci, Stéphane.
Merci beaucoup.